Shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. This is Barbara. I'm serving as your host today, and today Catherine is here with me. I just want to welcome everybody and invite you all to go to our website for more information about the Creator's Calendar. And I'll leave that information below. Well, the title of today's study is, Why Did Man Change the Calendar? Well, you'll see the dollar sign up here. It was all because of the dollar and commerce, and it's called the International Dateline. A close examination of the International Dateline irrefutably proves that the modern weekly cycle has not cycled continuously without interruption since creation, as I was taught that, and many of us were. Well, the International Dateline is absolute proof against Saturday Sabbath and its continuous weekly cycle. The Gregorian Calendar starting point does not begin in the heavens, but it begins with a man-made imaginary line existing partly between Russia and Alaska, known as the International Dateline, or the IDL.
It is possible and even proven beyond any shadow of doubt that you will have Friday on one side of this line and Saturday on the other side of the same line, while both sides of the line are under the exact same evening and morning. This is the kind of confusion that takes place when man tries to take the place of Elohim.
Well, you could have Preparation Day as the evening arrives on one side of this line and the Sabbath on the other side, a whole day apart. Thus, when one side is keeping the Sabbath holy, the other side is keeping Preparation Day. The following day, these people will keep Sabbath, and the folks already keeping Sabbath previously will go to work on the first day of the week. And that's enough to make your head spin. Now ask yourself, can the day be holy on one side of the street and not holy on the other side? Only with man's calendar does this happen. You do not have this problem with the Yah's calendar because its starting point exists in heaven.
For example, if both sides of the IDL, the International Dateline, are looking at the moon and count 6 work days and rest on the 7th, then as it gets dark, both sides will be keeping the same day, and both sides will be holy unto Yahweh. Just imagine the IDL running through the land of Canaan in Scripture, inhabited by Yah's people, the Israelites. You would have Israelites camping on either side of the line. On one side, it is the Sabbath, and on the other, it's preparation, as with the aforementioned scenario. Yah does not work like that, because he is not the author of confusion. The Sabbath is the Sabbath for all his people.
Well, now let's examine the currently accepted continuous weekly cycle. People assume that the weeks are strictly solar, when in fact they have a deeply rooted lunar aspect to them. The Scripture never mentions a 7-day cycle. Scripture is more related to a pattern of rest after 6 work days, and the new moon day is not one of the work days. And there is a calendar up here showing a new moon day is day 1, then you have 6 working days and a Sabbath. And we'll explain more later. A fixed weekly Sabbath and the International Dateline. Here we go. In Tonga, the Seventh-day Adventist Church worships on Sunday because when a change was made to the line, evidently by the king of Tonga, Saturday became Sunday. And this makes plain the ridiculousness of drawing an arbitrary line of division between our days. And so here are a few examples in history of this problem where the date line and dates have been changed. In 1844, Narcisco Clavera, the Governor General of the Philippines, issued a proclamation announcing that Monday, 30 December 1844, was to be immediately followed by Wednesday, January 1, 1845, So that's 2 days later at Monday, and then all of a sudden it's Wednesday.
In 1867, Alaska was sold to the United States for what by many was then considered to be the absurd large sum of $7,200,000. The change to the American mode of time reckoning was put into effect by decreeing that Friday, the 6th of October of the same year, would be followed by Friday, 18th of October, a shift of 12 days due to the change to the Gregorian calendar, plus 1 day on account of the day change, and minus 1 day for the relocation of the date line to the waters of the Bering Strait.
Well, here's another example. A similar adjustment of the date line occurred in 1892 when King Maletoa Lukra, I'm probably saying that wrong, of Samoa, was persuaded by a major American business house trading in that region to adopt the American day reckoning instead of the Australian or Asian day reckoning. In a fine stroke of the diplomatic flattery, this was put into effect by ordaining that the 4th of July in that year, that's 1892, would be celebrated twice. And here's a newspaper article. You can pause the screen and read it from 1892.
Kiribati adjustment of 1994-1995. This extended group of islands comprising the Gilbert, Phoenix, and Line Islands forms an independent republic within the British Commonwealth since 1979. Spread across an ocean area of no less than 5 million square kilometers, it consists of some 33 small atolls with a total surface area of totaling about 85,000 inhabitants.
The most recent major adjustment of the international date line just happened in 2011. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe you haven't, but on midnight, 10 o'clock Geneva time, as December 29, 2011 ended, Samoa and Tikola fast-forwarded to December 31. These countries chose to move from the United States side of the international date line to the New Zealand and Australia side to benefit trade and tourism. It is all about commerce and money. And so that meant that the 7th day of the week was now Sunday. So what would the Seventh-day Adventists do? What would you do if the government said tomorrow is Sunday when really you thought tomorrow was Sabbath? So Saturday and Sunday was split down the middle, and this is something every Seventh-day Adventist should know. International dateline shift creates 2 worship days for SDA churches in Samoa. Church rift, Saturday worship and Sunday worship for SDA churches in Samoa. These are good headlines that I don't know if the people in the Adventist church even knew about this happening, unless you lived in Samoa. And an argument on Sabbath day is based upon unscriptural, continuous weekly cycles. Can man determine when a day begins and ends?
Any map or globe that has the international dateline on it shows us the shortcomings of our modern way of calculating days. In essence, it tells us that man can determine when a day begins and ends and which day Sabbath is. In essence, man places himself in the place of Yahweh as the one who sets apart or sanctifies the day. Even if man did have such authority, his placement of the international dateline is inconsistent with the habitation of the globe. Since the West met the East on the shores of the Atlantic, as the Native Americans came over the Bering Strait long before Spanish Americans colonized the Pacific, a line to set apart the days ought really to be down the Atlantic.
Well, the whole problem is solved, however, with a lunar calendar. And that is the calendar in the heavens that shows the phases of the moon that tell you when to worship. And they're actually about 1 week apart, showing your weeks. So according to the Roman calendar cycle, it is possible for 3 people to keep different days as a Sabbath and all be right according to a Roman Gregorian calendar. And this is not so with the moon and the true natural patterns of Jehovah. Consider the following information as it relates to timekeeping, including the Sabbath day.
To prove the man-made cycle is an error, just simply stop, think, and ponder. If someone were to walk east toward the sun while someone else stayed still, then the one walking would meet the sun earlier and earlier each day than the one sitting still, gradually gaining time until they get 10 hours, 15 hours, and eventually 24 hours ahead of the ones sitting still. A full day ahead. Now, if the one walking travels around the earth back to where the one standing still is, he will have gained 1 whole day because he made an extra cycle around the earth while the other sat still waiting each day for the sunrise. The traveler actually gained a sunrise at the end of the journey around the earth, even if it took 20 years to complete. This is a fact that cannot be denied, and given this fact, people keeping the man-made calendar have serious problems.
So if half of a group of people decide to go into the world, evangelizing the good news, and they migrate around the world, keeping the 7-day cycle, guess what happens? When they meet up with the other half of the tribe 20 years later, or their descendants maybe 2,000 years later, they would be 1 day apart in their Sabbath keeping, even though they have the same calendar and neither missed a beat on the 7-day cycle. That's the 7-day continuous cycle. So would you expect the travelers to go back around the world to get on the same day as the others? Would you expect them to change the cycle they kept the last 20 years, or their ancestors kept for the last 2,000 years? Here's another example.
If someone left Israel and traveled east around the world and came again from the west, they would be keeping the Sabbath a day ahead of those that stayed. This would not have been noticed if someone in Israel had migrated around the world and came back because they were keeping the 7-day cycle, and no one could tell them they were in another day, and both days could not be the day Yahweh rested on in the beginning. Here is a good question. If there were 2 tribes that migrated east and west from Jerusalem using the 7-day uninterrupted cycle, their descendants would be keeping the weekly Sabbath on 2 different days when they meet on the other side of the earth, even if it is 200 or 300 years later when their descendants meet. I don't believe anyone believes that when the 12 tribes of Israel were scattered abroad, they all went in the same direction, and the ones that traveled the east, they and their descendants would gradually gain time as they migrated around the globe, and when they got halfway around the globe, they would have gained half a day, and the ones that migrated west, they and their descendants would gradually lose time because they're going away from the sun. This is an absolute that cannot be intentionally denied.
Both tribes faithfully kept up with the 7-day cycle. When they or their ancestors meet on the other side of the earth, one will be keeping the day one full day apart under the same sunrise and sunset. And Jehovah, he is not the author of confusion. Neither tribe would be willing to break their cycle because of their traditional count that was handed down to them from their ancestors. Technically, they would both be right according to the cycle, but both could not be right on the 7th day. This is an absolute. When the two tribes have only traveled 1/4 ways around the earth, this will put them 12 hours apart because one tribe will have lost 6 hours and the other will have gained 6 hours, and they will be standing on the opposite sides of the earth 12 hours apart. In essence, the one traveling east will see the sun 12 hours before the one traveling west sees it. Then, when they both continue migrating and their descendants meet on the other side of the earth, the ones that traveled east toward the sun will be 24 hours ahead of the ones that traveled west, and this puts them into two different daily cycles, or days, under the same sun. So, not to cloud the issue too much, but if there were 3 tribes, one tribe traveling east, one traveling west, another stays put, then when the 2 tribes that were traveling east and west passed one another and their descendants met back to where they started from, they would actually be keeping 3 different days for a week Sabbath, and every one of them would be 100% right on their count. But there's no way they could all be keeping the right Sabbath day. This problem goes away with lunar Sabbaths because when they meet, these people that were traveling, when they would meet on the other side, they would still be watching the great lights when the moon rises on both of them, and it would be the same day within the same 24-hour period. So, and this is nature's testimony, and you will see here the phases of the moon announcing the Sabbaths.
If you are a Saturday Sabbatarian, ask your pastor, how can we consistently observe a Saturday Sabbath without using the 130-year-old man-made international dateline? If he is honest, he will have to concede that it is impossible. The world simply cannot be united in observing a Gregorian day and or date without using the international dateline. The question that logically follows then is, how can Saturday be heaven's ordained 7th-day Sabbath? There's simply no way around it. If the day matters, then the method used to calculate the day matters too. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot say that the 7th-day Sabbath is of the utmost importance to our Father in heaven, while also saying it's acceptable to let worldly men determine when the 7th-day Sabbath begins and ends by way of the international dateline.
So which way will you choose, the Roman Gregorian calendar or the Creator's calendar that is in the heavens? The international dateline is absolute proof against the continuous weekly cycle and the Saturday Sabbath. It is absolute evidence for the lunar Sabbath and the calendar in the heavens. And this is just good old-fashioned common sense. And this is just using the mind that Yah gave you to deduce the truth. And Elohim said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, or worship times, and for days and years." Genesis 1:14. So, and we know Psalms 19:1 says, "The heavens declare the glory of Yah, the skies display His craftsmanship, and they display His calendar. And that calendar in the heavens of Yah can never be tampered with." So to access more information about says Sabbath and when the week begins and Sabbath begins, in the 6 working days and a Sabbath, please go to our website, lunarsabbathday.com. And we also invite you to come and join us for our fellowship every Sabbath and New Moon Day. And you can find that information on the events page. So thank you, everyone, for being here today, and I appreciate each one of you. And thank you, Catherine.
No problem. My honor. Thank you.